In this tutorial, I'm going to give you an overview of the Divi Library. The Divi Library is a place for you to save layouts that you've created, or even save individual modules, rows, or sections to be used later on a different page or even a different website. For example, let's say you spent a lot of time configuring this page in the Divi Builder, and the next time you want to build a page, you'd like to use that as a starting point where you can simply save that entire page to your Divi library, and then next time you're building a page, you can load that saved layout. It'll populate your page, and you can use that as a starting point. So this can save you a lot of time, especially when a lot of your pages might share some of the same elements. For example, let's say all of the pages on your site have this same footer section at the bottom with a call to action, and you want to mirror that across all the pages on your site. Well, instead of rebuilding that same section and module every time you add a new page, you can just save that section to your library, and when you create a new page, you can load it straight in, and it's going to save you a lot of time. And I think as you find yourself saving more and more items to your library, this library becomes a toolkit of sorts with all of the layouts and modules and sections and rows that you've created in the past, and you can use these to kind of jumpstart your new projects. So let's get started. When you're in your WordPress dashboard and you hover over the Divi link in the sidebar here, you're going to see a few options, and at the bottom you'll notice the Divi Library link, and if I click that, it's going to bring me into my library, and it's going to give me a list of all the library items, whether they be layouts, sections, rows, or modules that I've saved. Well, since this is a new website and I haven't actually saved any items to my library, there's nothing here, and so the next step is going to be to show you how to actually add an item to your library. So I'm going to head over to my home page here, and this is a page that I've built with the Divi Builder, and if I edit it, you can see the layout that I've created here. Now, the library can house complete layouts, individual modules, sections, or rows. So any of those 4 items can be added to the library. If I wanted to save this entire page to the library and use that in the future, then I could do that by using this top level link here. It says save to library. This is going to save the entire page. So if I click this, you're just going to give your layout a name. I'm going to call it new homepage and save. That's it. I've saved the whole layout to the page, and if I go over to my Divi library, you're going to see that new item listed. It's a layout type, so if I were to filter this by library item type, which are, like I said, pre-made layouts, section, rows, and modules, this would be a layout type because it's an entire page. And I can even edit this layout at any time from within the library. So if I wanted to modify this library item, you can do so from within the library, and then the next time you load that pre-made layout, those changes will be reflected. And so let's say I wanted to use this as the starting point for my new page. If I were to add a new page, instead of having to go through all the trouble of rebuilding that entire layout, well, this time when I use the Divi Builder, I'm going to say load from library here, and then I'm going to go over to my add from library tab, and you'll see this new item that I've added appears here, and if I click load, it's going to add that to my page, and there you go. You've saved your first pre-made layout to your library, loaded it on a new page, and it's going to save you a lot of time. Now, not only can you save entire layouts, you can also save individual modules, rows, and sections. So, as an example, I'm going to go back to my home page here. Now, a very common configuration for home pages is this is to have a slider and then this section of blurbs here. Very common. So, if you find yourself using this combination of modules quite often, every time you build a new site, well, why not just save this section to the library, call it homepage blurb section, and then the next time you build a page, you can load that right in instead of having to configure all these blurbs all over again. So I'm going to go back to my page. This time, instead of saving the entire layout to the library, I'm going to open up just this section that I'd like to save. And then at the bottom here, you're going to see 2 links. One is save and exit, which simply saves any changes you've made to the page itself. And then you also see save and add to library. What this will do is save any changes to your page, and it's also going to add that section to your library and then you can use that section down the road. So I'm going to choose that option. I'm going to say save and add to library. And there's a few options here that I need to go over. The first one is obviously you're going to need to give your section a name, your library item a name, so you can identify it down the road. And like I said, I'm just going to call it homepage blurbs. So now I know whenever I make a new homepage and I want to have that double row of blurbs below the slider, I can just load in this section. Now the next option is save as global. And I'm going to go into a lot more detail about this option later on in this tutorial. But just a quick overview about what this means. A global library item appears exactly the same on all the pages that you added to. And whenever you make a change to that library item, it gets updated and synced across all of the places that that global item is being used. So a good example of where this would be useful would be in that previous example I talked about earlier, which would be if you're creating a footer for your site and it has a call to action and it's mirrored, it's the same exact call to action on all your pages. Well, let's say you have this 20-page website and you've added this call to action at the bottom of your page. You've made it the same. It all has the same color, same background color, same text. And then one day you're redesigning your site and you want to make that call to action a different color. Well, in the previous scenario, you'd have to go to every single page, edit that module, change the background color, and do that 20 times. Well, in this case, since that module you want it to look the same on every page, what you could do is save that as a global section in your library, and then add that global section to all your pages. And if you at any time edit one of those global sections, it gets updated across all of those pages. So that's a basic overview of what a global library item is. In this case, I'm not gonna check that because, like I said, I'm gonna go over that in more detail later. Next, you can choose a category for your library item, and if you don't have any categories, you can create a new one. As people start building up their libraries, building up this web design toolkit of theirs, you're gonna find that the more library items you create, the harder it is to find them in your library unless you've categorized them. So in this case, you might have a category of library items for specific types of websites that you find yourself building often. And the next time you build a real estate website, for example, you go to your real estate category and you have all of these items that you can use to jumpstart your new design. So in this case, I'm just going to call it homepage. This will be my homepage category of all my homepage sections, I suppose. And then I'm going to click save. And now this section has been added to my library. And if I go over to my library, you're going to see that in addition to that layout I added earlier, I'm now going to have a section item in my library called homepage blurbs, as you can see here. And I can edit this if I like, and if I'd like to change the way these blurbs look. And then every time I load this library item on the page, those changes will be reflected. So like I said, you can edit any of these and save just like you would a normal page. And so now let's try adding that section to a page. So I'm creating a new page. This is a new home page, and I'm going to use the Divi Builder. And this time I know that I want to have those blurbs below a full width slider. So I'm going to add a new section from my library by clicking the Add from Library link down here. So along with your normal Add Section buttons here, you can choose Add from Library. And when you do that, you're going to get a list of all of your library items. And I only have one section in my library. It's called Homepage Blurbs here. And if I click that, it's going to load it in. And yep, there's that section I saved to the library. And now it's been loaded on my new page. And again, this can save you a lot of time. Okay, using that same philosophy, you can also save rows and modules as well. So if you find yourself using a specific module, for example, let's say that I've spent a lot of time on this blurb module in the advanced settings and the custom CSS settings. In fact, I've really modified this module. I've customized the size and the color of the icon. Maybe I've added some custom CSS animations, and it's taken me hours to do, and it's perfect. And down the road, I want to use that same exact module as a starting point. I don't want to have to reconfigure all those advanced design settings and custom CSS settings. I just want to save that for later use. Well, that's a perfect way to use the library. So I'm not going to go through the time of configuring all these options, but let's just say I've spent a lot of time on these advanced design settings and it looks great and I want to save this for later. Well, you can do that by just clicking the save and add to library link, just like you would a section. You're going to give it a name. I'm going to call it special blurb. And then as we saw before, we have your save as global option and your category options, but we also have a new set of options here, which are the selective sync options. And if you'd like more details about creative ways to use selective sync, I have a different tutorial about that, so be sure to check that out. And I also have an individual tutorial that talks about creative ways to use global modules, but for now I'm just going to give you a basic overview of what selective sync means. Basically, whenever you create a module, you'll notice that you can edit 3 different tabs. You have general settings, advanced design settings, and custom CSS settings. As a general philosophy, everything that you need to create a great module in Divi can be found in the general settings tab. And if you want even more control, we've added a whole slew of options into the design settings. And basically anything you could ever want to do design-wise can be done in those advanced design settings, but because there's so many of options, we've decided to separate them into their own tab. And the third tab would be the custom CSS tab. And if you're a developer and you don't really want to use our advanced design controls, you'd rather just code yourself, well, you can go over to the custom CSS tab and start adding some custom CSS for your module. Now what the selective sync does is when you're saving this item to your library, you can choose which tabs you'd like to save. So in this case, I've spent a lot of time modifying the advanced design settings and custom CSS, but when I load this new blurb module onto my page, I'm going to want to use new unique general settings, right? I'm going to want to add a new title and some new content. So there's really no reason for me to save the general settings into this item. I really just want to save the advanced design settings and custom CSS. So in this example, I'm only going to save those. And then when I load up the blurb into a new page, I'll just fill out my general settings, and those advanced design settings and CSS settings that I spent so much time developing are going to be all there for me. I'm going to add it to my homepage category and save. Okay, so I've saved that blurb to the library, and I've only synced to the tabs, the 2 tabs that I really care about. And so if I go over to my library, you're going to see that new module has been added. So now I've added a module, a section, and a layout. And like I said, as this library grows, you can filter the view here by type. So if I wanted to just see all the modules I've added to the library, I can just change to modules and filter. And then you're just going to see the module that I added here, my special blurb module. And at any time you can edit this, like I said. So you want to change anything about this. And as you can see here, since I only synced the advanced design settings and custom CSS settings, only those tabs appear. And if I were to add this to a new page, you can do so. So let's add a new page. And I'm going to add my new special blurb to a 3-column row here. So I'm going to click Insert Modules. And this time, instead of adding a new module, I'm going to add from library. So just like we did for sections, add from library. Here's my special blurb. I'm going to load it in, and then I would go ahead and configure the general settings, input my title and link and URL and all that good stuff. And like I said, all my advanced design settings and custom CSS settings would be saved. So that's a great way to use the library for blurbs and any module that you've spent a lot of time designing and would like to reuse in the future. So the next and final thing you can save to your library are rows. So let's say I have a row here, and just like a section, let's say it's a common row that I use quite often, and I'd like to save that to the library. Perhaps I've spent a lot of time developing this particular row to have a very specific use case, and I don't want to spend the time developing that every time. For example, let me clear this layout and start over and just give you a more specific example of why this might be useful. So let's say I'm working on this page. I'm going to update it and take a look. So I'm working on this new home page. Oops. Forgot to give it a title. New page. So I'm working on this new page, and I would like to create a very unique row below the blurbs here, and I want to make it a full width row and have 4 images next to each other below the blurbs here, kind of like a full width portfolio module, but instead I'm going to use just images. And so I'm going to spend some time making this row just the way I like it. I'm going to add a new row. I'm going to make it a 4-column row. I'm going to add an image into each of these columns. I'm going to change the image to be different for each column. All right, so I've added a new row to my page. And like I said, I want to spend some time making this row a little bit different than your average row. And so instead of having these images and standard width, I want to remove the spacing between each image, remove the spacing below the row, and make them go full width and create a whole different look for this row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the row settings here. I'm going to make this row full width. I'm going to bring the gutter width down to 0. I'm going to remove the padding on the bottom of this row. I'm going to save and exit, and I'm also going to remove the padding on the bottom of this section and update. So in this example, I've taken this row and completely transformed it into a row that looks way different and has a very different type of use. And so I might, as you can see here, all the images become full width. I remove the gutters. And so this is a particular type of row that is really quite useful in this particular situation where I'm adding images to each column. And so, you know, instead of having to do that every time I want to create this new look, I can just save this row to the library, and then anytime I want to make a full width kind of image gallery like this, I can just load it in and save myself a lot of time. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go over to this row, and I'm going to save and add to library. I'm going to call it full width image row. And I'm going to add it to my homepage category and save and exit. And then, like I said, anytime I want to create a similar looking row on a new page, I can just load that in like I always do by using the Add from Library tab. So I can go down, click Add Row. Instead of using a new row, I can do Add from Library and then choose my full width image row. And there you go. So yeah, that's a basic overview of all the different, all the 4 things you can add to your library. You can add completely built pages. You can add sections, rows, and also individual modules. Now, the last thing I wanted to touch on is to go back and take a look at the global modules. And like I said, I have a whole tutorial for this if you'd like to go look at the global module tutorial with some you know, creative ideas for how to use global modules. But in this case, I'm just going to show you how they work. Okay, so let's say I have this call to action at the bottom of my page, and to show you what that is, it's at the bottom here. It says, look no further, get started today, join now. And at the bottom of every page, I want to have this call to action that helps convince users to sign up to my service. And I want to mirror that on the bottom of every single page of my site. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this whole section as a global section. I'm going to go over here, I'm going to say save to library, I'm going to call it global footer, I'm going to make it a global item, save it to my homepage category, and then click save and add to library. And what you'll notice is that when you create and save a global item, whether it be a section, row, or module, it turns green. And this is important because it signifies to you that when you edit this module, it's going to change in every single site that it's been used on, every single page that it's been used on. And when you open up the modal settings, they're green as well, just to give you another reminder you're editing a global item. And so I'm going to update this page, and then I'm going to create a new page, and I'm going to add that global section to my new page, just like I did on the one I just created. I'm going to use the Divi Builder. I'm going to just load a layout really quick to get started. And then at the very bottom of this page, I want to add that global section. So I'm going to click Add from Library. I'm going to go over to the Library tab. And click the global footer section that I just saved. And you can see it's green. So whenever you're in your library, you can identify the global items from their color. So I'm going to click the global footer, and it's added. And if I bounce back to my other page here, you can see now I have two pages. Both of them have the this global item at the bottom of them. Okay, so I'm going to publish this new page. And take a look at the front end really quick. Okay, so here's this new page I built, and at the bottom I have this new global section with my call to action. And if you look at my other page, I have the same thing at the bottom here. So now I have this global section being added to two pages, and I'm going to show you now if I edit these, it's going to update on both pages. So that's the beauty of the global module. So I'm going to open up the call to action module inside of my global section. And I'm going to modify the section, not the module, and I'm going to change the background color to purple and save. And I'm going to update that. And now when I refresh both of these pages that have this shared global section on it, you're going to see that they both turn purple. And there you go. So that's the power of the global library item. You can have these items mirrored across any number of pages. You can update them once, and they get updated everywhere. So this can save you a ton of time. And like I said, be sure to check out my global module tutorial, where I talk about some other creative ways to use global modules, rows, and sections, especially in combination with selective sync, which I mentioned earlier. And yeah, that's a basic overview of the Divi library.